For the last decade and a half, Hollywood has had a creativity issue. Anyone paying even the slightest amount of attention can see the over-reliance on reboots, sequels, and remakes that shit all over the originals.
There's shit everywhere! Damn it!
The Karate Kid is one such franchise. A coming-of-age story about a douchebag teenager from New Jersey ruining the life of a young Californian karate champion.
That's not how I remember it.
It was a simple enough tale that could have easily remained a standalone. Instead, we got 3 sequels, a reboot 26 years later, and a TV series that completely ignored said reboot. Not to mention whatever the fuck that cartoon was where Miyagi and Daniel are secret agents who surf on cruise missiles. This brings us to Karate Kid Legends, the latest installment of the ever-growing Miyagi-verse, which attempts to continue the narrative by tying all the loose ends together and also start a completely different adventure. Does it succeed in respecting the past while carving a new path, or is it another ill-advised addition? The film is off to a great start by reusing a scene from Karate Kid 2, where we're reminded that Miyagi-Do karate is based in Kung Fu. They also had some poorly ADR dialogue over graphics to explain the connection between the two quote-unquote branches of the tree, the Hans and the Miyagis. Which is unnecessary because anyone with half a brain already made that connection after this line.
10 years later, he come back with Chinese wife and 2 kids.
In modern Beijing at the Han Kung Fu Academy, we meet Li Fong, who is secretly training in the back room. This is to avoid his bitchy mother who abhors his training because of something that happened to her other son. Which we're not told about yet, but I mean, come on, we can all figure out what it is. His hiding out is all for naught as she arrives to inform Han and Li that she has accepted a position at a hospital in New York City. Seems we're looking at another fish out of water story. Not necessarily a bad thing, so let's see where it goes. Upon arrival in the Big Apple, Lee immediately outs himself as a transplant by going to a local pizza shop and trying to order a stuffed crust. The owner, Victor, tells him to, and I quote, get in his car, take the Holland Tunnel to Jersey, drive 20 miles in any direction to a crappy strip mall, and then you'll get all the stuffed crust you want. First of all, and I'll fight anyone on this, I will put Jersey pizza up against New York pizza any fucking day of the week. But especially on Mondays, because usually you get the best deals. Second, according to Google, there are 24 Pizza Hut locations in New York City, almost half of which are in Manhattan, so get off your fucking high horse, dude.
Get on with it! Yes! Get on with it!
In order to not cause Lee any more shame, the embarrassing moment is broken up by Mia, Victor's daughter, who helps Lee with his order. The following morning, Lee attends his first day of school and like every protagonist in the series has trouble fitting in. As he makes his way home, he just happens to run into Mia, who shows him around the city. Along the way, they walk past Demolition MMA. Mia has a noticeably guttural reaction to the gym as she tells him to avoid it, mainly because it's full of assholes, including her ex-boyfriend Connor. A guy who, might I add, is a fucking celebrity in this city, as his face is on posters everywhere for his karate accomplishments. The gym is owned by a guy named O'Shea, who is also a loan shark that Mia's dad is indebted to. This jerk-off reminds Mia that her dad is a loser and wastes absolutely no time stirring the pot by informing Connor his ex is hanging around with a new guy. Man, this all seems so familiar. They continue their big city adventure as Mia attempts to purchase a part for something at the pizzeria, though she's having a bit of difficulty. The language barrier makes negotiating nearly impossible as the Chinese shop owner quotes her an extremely high price. Seizing the opportunity to gain favor, Lee speaks with the shop owner to get a discount. Lee then gets Mia to agree to teach him the city. In exchange, he will teach her Mandarin to get more discount parts. Because I guess she exclusively deals with shops owned by Chinese people or something.
Gonna be about $6,500.
How about $50?
The next day, she takes him around Manhattan on her scooter, which breaks down, because of course it does, forcing them to take the subway. And who of all people just happens to be on that exact subway car at that precise time of day? But Connor and the boys, who proceeds to publicly threaten the twosome before popping Lee in the eye. After the incident, Lee asks Mia what she saw in Connor. She says that it was her rebellious phase, but clarifies that he wasn't so bad until he started training at Demolition and won the 5 boroughs. What the fuck is the 5 boroughs, you ask? Well, it's an insanely convoluted karate tournament that takes place all over New York, where minors can win prize money. More on that much later. Back at the pizzeria, Victor notices Lee's black eye and is able to help. You see, Victor is a former boxer who knows how to cover up black eyes because his wife hated him fighting. You know, just like Lee's mom. By utilizing the sorcery known as makeup, Victor successfully hides Lee's black eye until the end of the scene. Because in the very next one, she notices it within seconds. She then chastises Lee and refuses to listen to a word he says, seemingly blaming him for being randomly assaulted on the subway.
How is this my fault?
This is quite frustrating because these two scenes create a situation where the latter makes the former utterly pointless. I'd really like to say that this is a one-off that got through to the final draft and they don't make any similar mistakes going forward, though I'd be lying if I did. As a pseudo-punishment, she gets him a tutor who immediately becomes the most irritating character in the film by poking fun at Lee's math skills. The very thing he was hired to help with. Also, I'm not sure if the word assemblers realized the hilarity of a white kid making fun of an Asian for not knowing how to do math.
Come on. Do math.
In a flashback, we see Lee and his brother training, which pretty much consists of them doing insane front flip kicks that would never work in real life.
I can fly!
No, I can't.
Lee is then taunted by Connor outside of the school, leading to a one-sided massacre. Connor wins handily. Or should I say unhandily, he decided to fight using kicks only. After the scuffle, he challenges Lee to the 5 boroughs. Returning home, Lee is in the alleyway behind the pizzeria attempting to fix Mia's scooter when Victor is jumped by 3 of O'Shea's thugs with bats. Lee then engages the assailants and wins handily. Again, back-to-back scenes where one null and voids the other. After coming to, Victor wants to learn Kung Fu because he believes it will help him in his upcoming return to prize fighting. He plans to take a few fights in order to pay off O'Shea.
This is not going to end well.
He explains how he used to be a great boxer, but when Mia was born, he opted to retire. And now he wants to dust off the gloves to secure their future. Though he can't do this without Kung Fu for some fucking reason.
No fucking idea.
At first, Lee is reluctant, though he changes his mind after calling Mr. Han for advice. This is where it takes a turn onto a really weird street where 125-pound Wing Chunner Lee is going to help Victor get ready for his heavyweight boxing match.
You're fucked.
Oh, and did I mention that we're only about 30 minutes in and all of this shit is happening before we even really get to the main plot?
How long is this going to take?
In order to get him prepped for the fight, Lee teaches him weird kung fu methods instead of, focusing on sparring or bag work, things that are actually effective. The two bond, becoming close to the point where Lee feels comfortable enough telling Victor about his brother's fate.
Well, we're waiting.
You see, a few years back, after winning a big tournament in Beijing, their opponents sought revenge and jumped the two of them, stabbing Lee's brother to death. Talk about overreacting.
That escalated quickly.
Lee's courtship of Mia also continues as she invites him to the San Gennaro festival. However, when he arrives, she's there with Connor for absolutely no reason.
You the dumb hoe.
The following night, Victor's fight happens, and wouldn't you know it, his opponent coincidentally is sponsored and trained by O'Shea, who proceeds to blatantly cheat, even going so far as to attack the referee. For some reason, the fight isn't called off, and Victor is severely injured in the process. Victor is rushed to the hospital, and because this script is solely based on hyper-convenient bullshit, his doctor is Lee's mom.
What a coincidence!
They're really hell-bent on making New York feel tiny for some reason. She again scolds Lee for being involved in fighting and refuses to let him speak once more. At least this time she has a good reason, as she has a dying man to attend to. Well, now that that completely random side quest is done, we can return to the main one. Lee goes home where he is ambushed in the dark. He fights for his life, but it turns out he's just being fucked with by Mr. Han, who has come to New York to check on everything. They go to visit Victor in the hospital, and they discuss the financial issues of the pizzeria, even though those should have disappeared, because Victor no doubt would have won his fight by disqualification. It's here that Han decides that Lee is going to compete in the 5 boroughs, because like every film you've ever seen, the prize money is essentially the exact amount that's needed.
Any way in the world we could raise $50,000. We could play dodgeball. They have a tournament in Las Vegas.
But seeing as how this is a karate tournament and not kung fu, they will need some help. He travels to see Daniel LaRusso, who has been absent from a majority of the film despite being all over the marketing, to basically cash in an old familial debt by having the disciple of Miyagi help train Lee. Let's figure out the logistics here. Han left China, not exactly a country known for its ease of exit, to travel halfway across the world. Let's assume there was a layover, but he made pretty good time. He then turns around to fly across the country to California, which is actually closer to Beijing than New York, just to talk to Daniel for 5 minutes and immediately return. All of this is done within 48 hours, mind you. Now, I'm sure he's making an okay living as a kung fu instructor in Beijing, but I fail to believe he's doing well enough to afford a private jet. Why didn't they just have him fly from Beijing to LA, talk to Daniel on his way to New York, and then they could have streamlined this entire sequence?
Fuck if I know.
Also, did I mention that Lee has a mere 7 days to learn karate rules for the tournament?
What?
That's some short notice. With the 2 branches of the tree brought back together, can Lee overcome the odds and win the 5 boroughs to save the pizzeria with the $50,000 prize?
I like money.
Wait a minute! You're telling me that these high school kids are gonna fight for 50 G's? Seriously? Okay, let me get this straight. This is most likely an unsanctioned tournament between 8 minors in random venues around the city. Yet it's paying 2 to 5 times more than the average fight purse of a debuting UFC fighter. Let's ignore the obvious child labor law issues here. Where the fuck did that money even come from?
How can you afford these things?
Is there just an anonymous billionaire dropping dime on this shit because he loves watching kids beat the piss out of each other? We all remember what happened to the last guy who did that, right? Anyway, now that the movie has finally found its footing with practically no time left, can it redeem itself with a strong ending, or will it just be more of the cliches we're used to? Spoiler alert, it's the latter. I'm not gonna lie, this one really bummed me out. I hoped to write a review on a good film for once, but this one had some glaring structural problems. One of the biggest issues with this film is the characters. There are far too many of them for the little screen time they have. Even the ones who get the lion's share are so inconsistent it's difficult to connect with them. The main character Li Fong is by far the biggest culprit. He spends the entire movie bouncing between helpless victim and absolute badass. He even takes the role as mentor for some reason. If you think back to the original film from 1984, we were able to connect with Daniel on multiple levels. He was displaced, bullied, and troubled by a lack of father figure in his life. Not to mention after seeing Allie, he was horny as fuck. With Lee, the displacement is there, but it never gets a chance to really take effect as they only play with it for about 5 minutes or so. Likewise, the lack of father figure is barely a factor as he ends up with 3 different mentors. The thing that truly throws off everything in terms of Lee being a character in need of guidance is that he spends a significant amount of time teaching someone else how to be a better fighter. His actual character growth takes a back seat until way later in the movie. Ben Wong has moments where he does well, but his performance is bipolar, alternating between showing a ton of emotion and being a mumble-mouthed derp. Sometimes in a single scene.
Hey, Mom?
You try harder next time.
By far the most important component to any Karate Kid movie or show is the mentor-student relationship. Daniel and Miyagi were the greatest example of this dynamic as we watched it grow from strangers to Miyagi being a reluctant teacher all the way up to best friends and Daniel's de facto dad. This was present in the sequels as well, where the bond was tested in a myriad of ways. The tradition continued through Cobra Kai in the form of Johnny and Miguel, and to give credit where credit is due, Mr. Han and Dre Parker in the 2010 reboot also had fairly good chemistry. Here that is severely lacking. We open up with a scene reminding us of Miyagi and Daniel, immediately followed by showing Han owning a kung fu school that Lee attends. But the student-teacher relationship is short-lived, as for the first time in Karate Kid history, the pupil is actually moved away from the master.
Whoa.
This could have been an interesting departure from the usual formula. Instead, the father figure is quickly replaced by Victor before flipping the script and making him the student, which upsets the apple cart completely in terms of narrative flow by making it seem like Lee already has all the tools. It's not until about halfway that Mr. Han returns to re-establish that familiar dynamic. Worse yet, Daniel reappearing only seems to serve as fan service, adding very little else. This is such a waste. We have Jackie Chan, the legend himself, and Ralph Macchio, Daniel fucking LaRusso, one of the most influential characters in cinema history, on screen together for the first time, and it doesn't feel special at all. There was a golden opportunity to bridge the gap in a much more meaningful way. Seeing as how this takes place sometime after Cobra Kai, having Han reach out to Daniel for help in the final scene of the show could have set up for Daniel meeting Lee much sooner and serving as his primary mentor in place of Han, who has obligations back in China. This would not only synergize everything, it would also give fans a nice little Easter egg and extra hype between the two properties, giving it the sensation of being part of the larger world rather than the detached feeling that we get for a majority of the runtime.
How is this relevant?
Also important is the love interest. Very few things could justify throwing hands like the hormone-induced rage felt by a group of teenagers with constant blue balls. Oh! Ali provided that in 1984, Kumiko in 86. Not so much Jessica in Part 3, but I still love that movie, goddammit. Hell, pretty much the entirety of Cobra Kai boiled down to who's gonna fuck who after prom.
We all get laid before we graduate.
With Mia, though, you just kinda get a strictly platonic vibe until the obligatory kiss scene. This may come down to a lack of chemistry between Ben Wong and Sadie Stanley, or maybe it's just the fact that they don't share nearly enough screen time to convey a budding relationship. But you just never get the sense that these two even really like each other. Not to mention the fact that she seems to get back with her ex-boyfriend Connor just to dump him again.
That makes you the hope.
A plot thread they don't even bother to explain outside of the old cop-out of, it's complicated. This isn't to say that Allie from the first film, or any of the other love interests for that matter, are deep and complex characters. For the most part, they're one-dimensional objects of affection. But in every other instance, the relationship added to, or in some cases completely drove the plot. With Mia, she just feels tacked on rather than providing narrative direction.
Boring.
If interpersonal relationships are the ingredient which the Karate Kid meal is cooked with, then the villains are the tinder that stoke the flames. The antagonists of the franchise have always been a bit of a mixed bag, ranging from high school bullies, street thugs, and megalomaniacal billionaires. These characters would be expanded on significantly years later, making them far more fleshed out than they originally were. That being said, we always got a sense of their intentions through their actions and conversations. This is yet another miss with Legends, as we spend absolutely no time with the villains. The stand-in for Cobra Kai here is Demolition Mixed Martial Arts, which right off the bat is a downgrade in name alone.
That doesn't sound at all like the old Cobra Kai.
It's a badass name for a dojo, by the way.
Their star student, Cont'd, is the reigning champion of the Five Boroughs tournament and ex-boyfriend of Mia. This is a similar setup to Johnny Lawrence, but that's pretty much where the comparisons end. Cont'd barely appears in the movie. He does have a fight with Lee early on and a brief encounter on the subway, but it pales in comparison to the torment that Johnny and the Cobra Kais put Daniel through in the first film. Hell, we have a much better sense of who Tommy and Bobby are at the end of the All Valley than we get from Connor in this one, and most people didn't even know their names until years later. And if someone put a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you anything about the Demolition MMA owner O'Shea other than he moonlights as a loan shark. He appears in all of 2 scenes with 3 lines of dialogue, and I'm not even sure if they ever even said his first name. Hell, as of the recording of this video, the motherfucker doesn't even appear on the IMDb page, which says more about the character than any amount of explanation ever could. The rest of the cast is rounded out by mostly minor insignificant characters, the annoying tutor, the random nameless thugs, and a teacher who has one line and is never referred to, but they felt the need to give her an actual name for some reason. But of all the underdeveloped characters, the one I feel the worst for is Lee's mother, Dr. Fong, played by Ming-Na Wen. She does well with what little she's given, though really is just asked to kind of play the bitchy mom trope throughout most of the runtime instead of allowing her to tap into a grieving mother's emotions, which she is beyond capable of doing. I really hope to see more of her in the near future because not only is she a really good actress, but for 61 she's still an absolute smoke show. And this is just now reminding me to book an appointment with my local Asian massage parlor, so just hold on a second. Yes, hi. Would you happen to have an opening that maybe I could fill this morning? Oh, you do? How much is that? That's a bit steep. Not sure I could cover that. Oh, half price if I come at the end of the day. Sloppy 7th discount? I think I'll pass. I don't think I've ever seen a movie with a pacing issue quite like this one. It's only an hour and a half, but packed with so many subplots, it feels twice that length. Yet despite being oversaturated and bogged down, it somehow still feels incomplete. This is due to the stop-and-go nature of the script, never allowing it to get out of second gear. I've already mentioned the boxing story, which actually forced me to double-check if I was still watching the same film. But there are other examples of subplots that crop up out of nowhere just to screw up the pace, such as Lee being pressured by his mother to take the SATs. This seemed like it was important enough that it required introducing the annoying tutor, only for it to basically never be brought up again. Not to mention all of the Han and Miyagi connections boiling down to a short conversation that felt hollow. I get the impression that there was 2 distinctly different versions of the script. One that utilized all the usual tropes and another that tried to go in a completely different direction. And when the word assemblers couldn't decide between them, they instead just mashed them together. Had they dropped a few of the subplots and focused on the primary storyline more, we would have had a better sense of who these characters are. Instead of Lee's mother barely appearing on screen, we could have explored her grief, torn between watching her son being targeted by bullies and knowing that he possesses the ability to stop it, but her forbiddance is what's holding him back. Her blessing being the missing piece of the puzzle which gets him over his mental block, preventing him from reaching deep down and finding what's needed to defeat Connor. In fairness, she does eventually come to terms with all of this, giving Lee the proverbial thumbs up. 4 fights into the tournament, so yeah, just a little late. Speaking of the fight sequences, they're a departure from what we're used to with the Karate Kid, which was normally more grounded in traditional point sparring. Here they have taken a more stylized approach reminiscent of kung fu movies. It's very plain to see the influence that Jackie Chan had on these scenes. This doesn't necessarily equate to bad, but it's definitely a bit weird to see. There is also the new addition of using on-screen graphics. We actually see this early on when Han is training kids in Beijing as a strange way of doing the instruction subtitles, which honestly just looks silly. But I'd be lying if I didn't admit that their usage during the fights to keep track of the points wasn't a breath of fresh air, considering we never know what strikes count in this series. I had high hopes for this one after the ending of Cobra Kai. Legends seemed poised to ride that wave and firmly plant the franchise back into theaters. But rather than the return to form we all wanted, we got a crowded mess of a film. One that has a few good ideas buried under a mountain of mistakes and deceptive marketing, squandering the goodwill that the series had built up recently. And if that doesn't convince you that Karate Kid Legends is a big step in the wrong direction, I don't know what to tell you.